Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed how one toxic person can steal your peace in a matter of seconds? One disrespectful comment, one sarcastic smile, one message on your phone. Suddenly your heartbeat changes, your thoughts race, and for the rest of the day, they're living in your mind, rent-free. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Toxic people don't control your life because they're powerful. They control it because they know how to trigger your emotions. And every time you react without thinking, you hand them exactly what they wanted. Your attention, your energy, and your peace. The strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. It isn't the one who wins every argument or has the perfect comeback. True strength is far quieter than that. It's the ability to stay calm when chaos is invited into your life. It's the discipline to remain unshaken when someone is trying their hardest to shake you. Silence isn't weakness. Silence can be strategy. It can be confidence. It can be the invisible shield that protects your mind from people who thrive on drama and emotional manipulation. Today, we're going to uncover the silent power, the mindset that makes toxic people lose their influence over you. Because the moment you stop reacting the way they expect, you stop becoming someone they can control. And when that happens, something extraordinary begins. Your peace becomes untouchable. Most people believe toxic people are powerful because they're louder, more aggressive, or more manipulative. But that's not the real reason they seem to win. The truth is much simpler and much more uncomfortable. Toxic people succeed because they understand one thing that most people don't. They know how to control your attention. They don't need to be stronger than you. They only need to be able to provoke you. Think about it. A stranger makes one disrespectful comment, and hours later, you're still replaying the conversation in your head. A coworker criticizes you unfairly, and suddenly your mood changes for the entire day. Someone spreads gossip about you, and instead of focusing on your goals, you're consumed with proving them wrong. They may have spoken for only a few seconds, but you've spent hours carrying the emotional weight of what they said. That's how influence works. It isn't measured by how loudly someone speaks. It's measured by how much space they occupy in your mind. The moment they can dictate your emotions, interrupt your focus, or change your behavior, they've gained access to something incredibly valuable. Your inner world. The mistake most people make is believing they have to fight every battle. They think every insult deserves a response. Every accusation deserves a defense. Every act of disrespect must be answered immediately. But reacting to everything doesn't make you strong. It makes you predictable. And predictable people are easy to manipulate. Toxic individuals study reactions. They pay attention to what frustrates you, what makes you angry, what makes you defensive, and what causes you to lose your composure. Once they discover your emotional buttons, they don't have to work very hard anymore. They simply press the same buttons again and again, knowing you'll respond exactly the way they expect. This is why emotional control is one of the greatest forms of self-protection. When someone cannot predict your reaction, they lose their advantage. They throw criticism, but you remain calm. They expect anger, but you respond with composure. They look for insecurity, but they find confidence. Suddenly, the strategy they've relied on no longer works. People often mistake emotional restraint for weakness because we've been taught that strength means immediate action. In reality, impulsive reactions usually reveal a lack of control. Anyone can explode when they're angry. Anyone can argue when they're insulted. Anyone can seek revenge when they're hurt. Real discipline begins when you have every reason to react, but choose not to. Your attention is your most valuable resource. Whatever captures it begins shaping your thoughts, your emotions, and eventually your decisions. Toxic people understand this better than most. They don't always want your friendship or your approval. Sometimes they simply want your attention. Because attention is influence, every minute you spend obsessing over someone else's negativity is a minute taken away from building your future. Every argument you replay in your mind steals energy that could have been invested in your growth. The greatest victory isn't proving toxic people wrong. It's refusing to let them become the center of your mental and emotional life. The hidden reason toxic people appear to keep winning has very little to do with their strength and everything to do with the attention they're able to steal, the emotions they're able to trigger, and the control people unknowingly surrender every time they react without awareness. Every emotional reaction comes with a cost. Most people think the cost is the argument, the embarrassment, or the temporary stress they experience in the moment. But the real price is much higher. Every time you allow someone else to dictate your emotional state, you quietly surrender a piece of your personal power. You stop being the author of your own behavior and become a character in someone else's script. This doesn't happen overnight. It begins with small moments that seem harmless. Someone interrupts you and irritation takes over. A rude comment makes you defensive. A dismissive look causes you to question yourself. Before long, your mood is no longer determined by your values or your purpose. It's determined by whoever happens to cross your path. The emotional steering wheel of your life is no longer in your hands. Toxic people recognize this pattern almost instinctively. They know they don't need to force you into making bad decisions. They only need to create enough emotional pressure for you to make those decisions yourself. Anger clouds judgment. Fear weakens confidence. Frustration destroys patience. The moment your emotions become stronger than your awareness, your decision-making begins to suffer. That's why manipulation is rarely about controlling your actions directly. It's about controlling your emotions first. Once someone can make you angry, they can make you careless. Once they can make you insecure, they can make you seek approval. Once they can make you afraid, they can influence the choices you make. Your emotions become the doorway through which your power quietly slips away. Notice how often people regret what they say in moments of emotional intensity. They send messages they wish they could delete. They make promises they never intended to keep. They reveal personal information they later wish had remained private. They damage relationships, careers, and reputations because one emotional reaction lasted a few seconds, while its consequences lasted for years. The strongest people understand that emotions themselves are not the enemy. Anger, disappointment, sadness, and frustration are all natural human experiences. The problem begins when emotions become the decision-maker instead of the messenger. Emotions provide information, but they should never be allowed to take control of the driver's seat. Imagine someone trying to provoke you with criticism. They expect you to defend yourself immediately. They expect your voice to rise, your patience to disappear, and your focus to shift entirely toward them. But instead, you remain calm. You listen without rushing to respond. You refuse to match their emotional intensity. Suddenly, the conversation changes. Not because they became reasonable, but because you refuse to become reactive. Calmness creates uncertainty for manipulative people. They rely on emotional predictability. When they throw negativity, they expect negativity in return. When they attack, they expect you to fight back. But when they encounter someone who stays composed, their strategy begins to collapse because emotional manipulation depends on emotional participation. This is why protecting your reactions is one of the most important forms of self-respect. Every unnecessary argument drains your energy. Every defensive explanation weakens your confidence. Every impulsive response hands someone else the ability to shape your state of mind. The less control others have over your emotions, the more control you regain over your life, your decisions, your confidence, and the direction you choose to move forward. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. Many people see silence as surrender. They assume that if you don't defend yourself immediately, you've admitted defeat. If you don't argue back, they think you've run out of answers. If you don't react, they mistake your calmness for weakness. But true silence has nothing to do with fear. It has everything to do with control. Anyone can speak when emotions are high. Anyone can interrupt, criticize, or try to have the last word. That requires very little discipline. What requires real strength is resisting the urge to react simply because someone expects you to. There is tremendous power in choosing your response instead of allowing your emotions to choose it for you. Toxic people often survive on reactions. They create conflict because conflict gives them attention. They provoke because they enjoy watching people lose control. They insult because they want to see insecurity. Their greatest satisfaction doesn't come from being right. It comes from knowing they can influence your emotional state. The moment you react exactly as they predicted, you've confirmed that they know how to control you. Silence interrupts that cycle. It removes the reward that manipulative people are looking for. Imagine someone trying to start an argument, expecting you to defend yourself point by point. Instead, you pause. You maintain steady eye contact. You refuse to raise your voice. You don't rush to explain yourself. That silence is not empty. It's communicating confidence, emotional discipline, and self-respect without saying a single word. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing they must respond to every opinion others have about them. They feel responsible for correcting every misunderstanding, disproving every rumor, and answering every accusation. But not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every criticism deserves your explanation. Sometimes, your silence says, "I value my peace more than I value winning this argument." This doesn't mean ignoring every problem or avoiding difficult conversations. There are moments when speaking is necessary, especially when boundaries need to be established or important issues must be addressed. But there is a significant difference between speaking with purpose and reacting out of emotion. Purpose creates clarity. Emotion often creates chaos. Think about the people who naturally command respect. They don't rush to fill every moment with words. They don't panic when someone challenges them. They listen more than they interrupt. They pause before responding. Their confidence doesn't depend on proving themselves every few minutes because they understand that confidence is demonstrated through consistency, not constant explanation. Silence also gives you something incredibly valuable. Time. Time to think instead of react. Time to observe instead of assume. Time to understand what someone is really trying to accomplish. Often, what appears to be a personal attack is actually someone else's frustration, insecurity, or desire for control. When you remain silent long enough to observe rather than immediately respond, you begin to see people more clearly. The quieter you become internally, the harder you are to manipulate externally. Your mind becomes less crowded by other people's opinions. Your emotions become less dependent on their behavior. Your decisions become guided by your values instead of temporary feelings. Silence is not about withholding words for the sake of appearing mysterious. It's about refusing to give away your emotional power every time someone demands a reaction, choosing composure over chaos, discipline over impulse, and peace over unnecessary conflict. Remaining calm when someone is trying to manipulate you is not something that happens by chance. It is a skill, and like every skill, it must be practiced before you need it. Most people wait until they are already angry, hurt, or frustrated before trying to control themselves. By then, their emotions have already taken over. The secret is to prepare your mind long before the moment arrives, because emotional strength is built in quiet moments, not in the middle of conflict. The first thing to understand is that manipulation usually follows a pattern. Toxic people rarely create chaos without a purpose. Sometimes they want attention. Sometimes they want control. Sometimes they want validation by making someone else feel smaller. If you can recognize the pattern instead of focusing only on the words being spoken, you immediately gain an advantage. You stop asking, "Why did they say that?" and start asking, "What reaction are they hoping to get from me?" That single shift changes everything. Once you recognize the intention behind someone's behavior, you no longer have to become emotionally attached to it. Their words stop feeling like absolute truth and begin to look like a strategy. An insult may no longer seem like a personal attack. It becomes an attempt to provoke. A sarcastic remark becomes an invitation to argue. A false accusation becomes a test of your emotional discipline. When you see the game, you're less likely to become a player. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is creating space between what happens and how you respond. Most people react instantly because they mistake speed for strength. They believe they must answer immediately or they'll appear weak. But confidence doesn't rush. Confidence pauses. Even a few seconds of silence can prevent words you'll later regret. That brief pause gives your logical mind the opportunity to catch up with your emotional mind. Your breathing also plays a bigger role than most people realize. When you're triggered, your body prepares for conflict. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tighten and your breathing becomes shallow. Without realizing it, your body begins making decisions before your mind does. A slow, controlled breath interrupts that process. It tells your nervous system that you're safe, allowing you to think more clearly instead of reacting automatically. Another important practice is refusing to personalize everything. Not every negative comment is truly about you. Many people speak from their own pain, insecurity, jealousy, or frustration. Someone who constantly criticizes others often reveals more about their own emotional state than about the people they're criticizing. Understanding this doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it prevents you from carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to begin with. Strong boundaries are another form of calmness. Remaining calm doesn't mean allowing people to disrespect you repeatedly. It means addressing disrespect without surrendering your self-control. You can walk away. You can say no. You can end a conversation. You can remove yourself from unhealthy environments without raising your voice or seeking revenge. Sometimes the calmest response is also the clearest boundary. Remember that every interaction is shaping your character. Each difficult conversation is an opportunity to strengthen your emotional discipline. Every attempt to provoke you becomes another chance to prove that your behavior belongs to you, not to the person standing in front of you. Over time, you'll notice something remarkable. The people who once had the power to upset you begin losing their influence, not because they changed, but because you stopped giving them control over your thoughts, your emotions, and your peace. There comes a point in life when you realize that peace is not something you find. It is something you protect. The world will always contain difficult people, unfair situations, harsh criticism, and unexpected disappointments. You cannot eliminate every source of negativity around you, but you can become the kind of person who is no longer controlled by it. That is what it means to become emotionally untouchable. Being emotionally untouchable does not mean becoming cold, distant, or incapable of feeling. It doesn't mean you stop caring about people or pretend that nothing affects you. It means your emotions are no longer available for anyone to manipulate. You still experience disappointment, frustration, and sadness, but you no longer allow those emotions to dictate your behavior. You acknowledge them, learn from them, and then move forward without giving them permanent control over your life. One of the biggest shifts happens when you stop measuring your worth by other people's opinions. Many people spend years chasing approval without realizing they have handed strangers the authority to define their confidence. A compliment lifts them up. A criticism tears them down. Their emotional state rises and falls depending on what someone else thinks. That is an exhausting way to live because it places your self-worth in hands that were never meant to hold it. Real confidence grows from within. It comes from knowing your values, honoring your principles, and acting in alignment with the person you want to become. When your identity is rooted in your character instead of public opinion, criticism loses much of its power. You no longer feel the need to defend yourself against every misunderstanding because your sense of self is no longer dependent on being understood by everyone. Protecting your peace also requires learning to choose your environment wisely. Not every relationship deserves unlimited access to your time and energy. Some people consistently bring encouragement, honesty, and growth into your life. Others repeatedly create conflict, drama, and emotional exhaustion. Wisdom is recognizing the difference and having the courage to create distance when necessary. Every relationship either adds strength to your life or quietly drains it. Your daily habits also determine how emotionally resilient you become. A mind constantly filled with comparison, resentment, and negativity becomes easier to provoke. A mind trained through reflection, gratitude, discipline, and purpose becomes much harder to shake. Emotional strength is not built only during difficult conversations. It is built through the choices you make every single day when no one is watching. There will still be moments when someone says something unfair. There will still be people who misunderstand your intentions, question your character, or try to provoke a reaction. The difference is that you will no longer feel obligated to carry every opinion into your heart. You begin asking yourself a powerful question before reacting. Does this deserve my peace? Most of the time, the answer is no. As your emotional discipline grows, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop wasting energy on battles that cannot improve your life. You stop chasing closure from people who never intended to give it. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, your attention returns to the things that truly matter: your purpose, your growth, your relationships, and your future. The greatest victory over toxic people is not proving them wrong, defeating them in an argument, or making them regret how they treated you. The greatest victory is reaching a place where they no longer have the ability to disturb your inner peace, because your mind is no longer available for manipulation. Your emotions are no longer controlled by outside forces. In your silence, your confidence and your self-respect have become stronger than anyone else's negativity.